Susanna White, in 25 words or less, or thereabouts, can you just give us a quick description of the story of Our Kind of Traitor?
Our Kind of Traitor is the story of an unlikely relationship of one man who tries to save another man's family. Ewan McGregor is an English professor who gets caught up in a web of events involving the Russian mafia and MI6 and falls under the spell of Stellan Skarsgard, who is the main money launderer for the Russian mafia. And it's the story of their unlikely relationship.
And when all is said and done, how did the film work out for you? Was it a good movie to make?
It was great. I mean, it was a huge adventure to make in that we shot it in 5 countries. We started in the snow in Finland for Russia, and then we shot in England, then we got on the Eurostar train to Paris, shot a scene when we were travelling, then shot in Paris, got another train to Switzerland, shot a scene on that train, shot in Bern, then went to the French Alps, and then travelled to the heat of Morocco to shoot a whole bunch of scenes there. So I think one of the great things about the film is it moves through all these incredible landscapes, from the snow of the high Alps to the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. So as well as being a kind of keep you on the edge of your seat thriller, it's a road movie, and it's got a lot of emotional layers to it too.
Susanna White, if you're trying to convince me that this was work, you're doing a very, very bad job.
I promise you it was work. It sounds glamorous, but to do 10 days of night shoots up in the Alps, and then we had to shoot a big helicopter scene, and the cinematographer was wanting to wait for best light at dawn, and we're up the mountain in the freezing cold. And then we had to drive 300 miles to Marseille, get on a plane, and then the first assistant director wanted to keep us on night, so we basically weren't allowed to see any daylight for a long time. So it actually, it sounds glamorous, but it was physically quite a tough thing to do.
Well, I'm sensing that it was fun, but I'm also wondering, was it fun in the moment, or is it more a case that it was fun on reflection after all the hard work was done? That you look back at it and think, well, that was quite a jaunt.
Yeah, no, at the time, I think it just feels like, are we going to get everything done in the time? Because you've always got a ticking clock, and it's, physically it's demanding, and it's filmmaking's always stressful. It sounds wonderful. You're working with these famous name actors, and they're lovely people to work with, but every day you're thinking, right, have I got this, have I got that, because you can't overrun, and you can't mess up really. And this was a complicated film, and it's got stunt work, it's got knife fights, it's got a lot of physically demanding stuff. So it wasn't one of those kind of 2 people in a restaurant type of films. This had a lot of elements to it. It had CGI and a lot of things to get right.
It's based
or
on
to get wrong, if you got them wrong.
Now, this is based on a John Le Carre story, and you have got so much experience in TV especially, where the demands on producing something that has a lot of expectations riding on it are very, very high. So on a film like this, are you as a director looking to put your own signature on the film?
I think that's really important, actually, because, the bar is very high on John Le Carre, going, right back to Richard Burton in The Spy, came in from the cold to films I love, like The Constant Gardener. There have been great filmmakers making them, and I think for me the thing was not to be too freaked out by that, to look at the work the other great directors had done and then think, okay, well, what's my version of this? Because at the end of the day, that's why you're there, that's why they hired you, and you have to be true to yourself as a filmmaker and think, what are the things that I could bring to it? And I suppose what I did bring to it was experience in action and visual effects, but also I think strong performance and and a lot of emotion. That's probably what makes it different from some of the others. It's this very strong story of one man trying to save another man's family, and so that's what I try to do. Plus, I think the great thing about working on one of these Le Carres is everyone wants to do them. So I managed to get great people to work on the movie. Anthony Dobmantle, who was the cinematographer, had done Slumdog Millionaire and Last King of Scotland, and Sarah Greenwood, the designer, had done Anna Karenina and Atonement. So I had a great team around me as well.
I've got to say that this movie really does reflect the versatility that you've developed over the last couple of decades. An untrained eye might look at shows like Jane Eyre and films like Nanny McPhee and say, what's this person making a film like this for? But then you've also done Boardwalk Empire, Parade's End, and Generation Kill. So how do you place it in the development of your work? Does it seem like a logical progression for you?
Well, it did in a funny way, because I tell you why. Generation Kill, I feel, is probably the single best piece of work that I did, and I don't know if it's got to do with being a woman, but the film I was offered straight after that was Nanny McPhee, a family film, which was a great thing to do, but not necessarily what you'd expect someone to do just on a TV series about the American invasion of Iraq. So in some ways, this is a more logical step for me to do a big film that involves a lot of action and another big road movie, because it feels like a more natural progression from Generation Kill, I think, to do something like this. But no, I've been lucky. I've had a lot of variety in the work that I've done.
It's extraordinary is what it is.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me pressing you on this point, I mean, you've got to be joking. Generation Kill is an extraordinary TV series. Boardwalk Empire is part of this motion picture television movement that started back with shows such as The Sopranos. Parade's End was extraordinary television, and Nanny McPhee was a huge hit, especially given that it was a sequel. You're being very, very modest here.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's... I guess what I've always followed is I love great writing, and I've been lucky enough to work with some of the world's greatest writers, from David Simon to Tom Stoppard, to on this film Hossamini, and so I've always been very script driven, and in some ways my career's been like where people have offered me work, so it's got this kind of this zigzaggy path where I do different things, and I guess I'm not afraid. Maybe that's what it is. The filmmakers I admire most, like Billy Wilder or Ang Lee, they've got incredible diversity to what they do, and if now the next one I'm doing is a sort of western, actually, or an anti-western, and I've always wanted to make a western, so I guess I love the chance to flex every muscle I've got.
Just quickly, what's this western that you're working on?
It's called Woman Walks Ahead. It's a true story of a woman who was a portrait painter in New York in the 1880s who had a relationship with Sitting Bull, the Native American leader, in the last year of his life. And she went out to the Dakotas and spent a year there. And Jessica Chastain is playing her, Catherine Weldon, and I'm right in the middle of casting Sitting Bull right now. So it's set in an amazing landscape and tells a very strong political story of Native American land rights.
Well, I was going to ask you about how long it was going to take before Hollywood started seducing you, but it sounds like it's already happening.
I think seduction's happening right now. Lucky for me, yeah. But again, it's another piece with a British writer who's done it, Steve Knight, who wrote Peaky Blinders and Eastern Promises. And it's the second script he ever wrote, and it's been sitting on a shelf, and I came across it and fell in love with it, and persuaded some people to let us make it happen. So it's very, very exciting.
I'm very interested to know how you identify good story quality. And I want you to answer in the context of this era we live in now, where television is actually offering us some of the best storytelling we've seen in the history of the medium, while at the same time film is offering us some of the worst storytelling we've seen in the history of the medium. So how do you, as a director, identify good story quality, and what do you respond to?
God, first of all, I'm so happy to see television finally get the recognition it deserves, because it's something I grew up on and always loved. You know, there were no filmmakers in my family, and when I was a kid, I just was glued to the TV. And I always thought television was a wonderful thing, so I'm very happy to see it find its moment. And in a way, I think that's about television getting recognition, because television works well, I think, when there are cliffhangers and it's episodic. I think one of the biggest successes I had was with Bleakhouse, the Dickens adaptation I did for BBC, where Andrew Davies said, well, actually, Dickens was writing a soap opera, and he'd do these monthly instalments of his stories, and you'd have to get readers to go and buy the next edition. And so it worked very much like a soap, and I think television's best at that, at stories where you want to come back for the next episode, where you really get dug in with characters over a long period and watch them develop, as we did in Generation Kill, and actors love that. Well, I think for cinema, you've got to get people to pay their money and go out of their house and go down to the cinema now. And I think, there's been a moment when people have thought, well, we have to do these huge franchise blockbusters. That's the only way people will go. And I think that's dangerous, because I think cinema is a very, very powerful medium. Going right back to, I remember when I was very young going to see, I love James Bond, and I remember early on going to see Goldfinger in the cinema and being amazed by how I could step off the pavement and go into that cinema, and the world has transformed, and you were taken on this huge journey with these huge and terrifying villains on screen. And I think for me it's about, for cinema, finding something that's truly cinematic, which I think Our Kind of Traitor is. And it operates in a different way, operates visually, and sometimes you can take a bit of time with things in the cinema. Play to the strength of the big screen. But it has to be a signature thing, I think. It has to be something special that people are going to pay their money to go to, whether that's because of the movie stars or because of the look of the film, or ideally because of both.
Generation Kill was such a remarkable accomplishment in television realism about the war in Iraq, and you directed about half the episodes. Kim Barker wrote the Taliban Shuffle, on which the film Whiskey Tango Foxtrot was based, which was produced by Tina Fey, and Catherine Bigelow, of course, directed The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. Women seem to be playing a very large part in telling the story of what's going on with this war. Can this be a coincidence?
I think women do bring something very different to the experience of war in reflecting it on screen. I actually think it's got something to do with a lack of testosterone, that you can be a bit calmer around it and just kind of stop and look at characters. And I always remember being on the set of Jane Kill and everyone getting incredibly excited the days we were doing explosions, and they saying to me, do you want to press the button to blow the building up? And I just wasn't that. I was more interested in what Alexander Skarsgård's character was doing on that day than blowing the building up. And so I said to the armourer, could I try firing the AK-47s and the Mark 19s just to see why everyone was getting so excited? And I remember doing that and getting a sort of big adrenaline buzz from firing the guns. I wanted to know what the guys were getting so excited about. And so, I did feel like I'd had 22 cups of espresso when I'd done that. But having said that, at the end of the day, I was more interested in how that experience changed the people in it. And I think that's what Catherine's done, and that is probably what we do. We can just sort of sit back and reflect a bit more. So I think we probably do bring something a bit different to it.
Is this the first time that point's ever been brought up to you?
What, that women bring something different?
That women seem to be responsible for a lot of the films and TV shows that we're seeing about the war.
Yeah, and I don't think people have asked me about it a lot. Certainly not.
Now,
and it's a very fair point.
Now, in America at the moment, much is being made, as it should be, about the issue of gender inequality in the entertainment business, especially when it comes to the number of writers and directors working in mainstream film. To what degree has this been an issue for you?
Well, I've been very lucky. I've had a long, career, and I've worked pretty solidly. I think it sort of has shown where I was part of a big study here that came out about 3 months ago, where Directors UK, the main body that represents directors in the UK, commissioned a study into gender inequality. So I've been very involved in looking at it, and what that showed is something that really is very true of my own career, that it's much harder for women. Women do quite well starting out in factual programming when there aren't big crews, but the difficulty for women comes when you want to make a move into drama, and then from television drama into feature films. You're 6 times more likely to get to make a feature film if you're a man than if you're a woman, and it took me a long time to get to make my first film, which was Nanny McPhee, as you said. After and I guess I'd been lucky enough to have a lot of success in television. I'd won the BAFTA for Bleakhouse, and I'd had 2 Emmy nominations for Best Director, and yet it took me nearly another 10 years to get to make a feature film after that, and now it's taken me a while to get to make my second feature film, and it's hard for anyone, whether you're a man or a woman, to get to make a feature, but it really is 6 times harder if you're a woman than if you're a man, and what you do tend to get offered are family films, children's films, possibly teen drama, something like a spy thriller like Our Kind of Traitor. Only 3% of those are directed by women. So I think it's, I wouldn't say anyone's ever, no one's ever been sexist on set to me. I've never had any difficulty when I've got as far as making a film. It's just taken me a bit longer, I think, and I think that's the reality, that it is harder.
Yeah, it does make you wonder, it's 2016 now. Why is it taking so long, given that women have shown that they can do just about everything as well as anyone else can? It all seems a bit behind the curve. But I'm sorry, I'm changing the subject.
No, not at all. And I think it's really important, and I think we're richer for it when we get all these diverse voices telling stories. Women tell good ones.
We've been reading reports about the possible negative effects Brexit might have on British and European cinema. What's your reading of this? Do you have an opinion, or are you just tired of the subject?
I'm just so depressed about it, because it's a very sad day for me to see Britain make that vote. I think it's early days. It's hard for us to know. I mean, certainly we've benefited from European subsidies here. The falling pound might mean that we get more American productions coming, or war overseas productions coming into Britain, but I don't know. I think it's too early to know. No one knows much at this point, and I think we're just all in a state of reeling from the shock and trying to figure it out in Britain at the moment.
If you were making Our Kind of Traitor now, would it be more difficult?
Probably not yet, but I would say in 2 years' time it would be a lot harder for us to do all those co-productions that we did.
So once all the changes have kicked in and it's official that the UK is no longer part of the EU, you're actually saying it would have been more difficult for you to make this film?
I mean, for sure, and even right down to the editor who did the film and who's doing my next film, who's Italian and living in London. Well, she probably won't be allowed to be in London anymore. I mean, it's a crazy situation.